One man's misfortune can lead to another man's opportunity. And in the NFL, when the starter goes down, what do they always say? Next man up. And when the next man comes in and he outperforms the previous starter, why should he not remain the starter if he's giving you more production at that position than what the previous guy was? And in the NFL today, when you draft a young quarterback, you don't have 4 to 5 years to wait for that guy to reach his potential. It's not the 1990s. It's not the early 2000s anymore. When you get drafted in the first round as a quarterback, especially in the top 5 or top 10 in the draft, these teams expect you to be able to play either right away or within 1 or 2 years. And when it comes to this 49ers quarterback controversy, there seems to be a huge divide amongst the 49ers fan base. On one end, you have fans who are huge supporters of Trey Lance, and they believe that he needs to start because the only way that he's going to get better is by getting in-game reps, and that he has so much potential over Brock Purdy that this potential, for it to be unlocked, he needs to gain more experience. And then you have the other side of the 49ers fan base who feels like Brock Purdy has earned the right to be the starting quarterback for this squad, given with how he performed last year, leading this team all the way to the NFC Championship game. And with him being more productive than Trey Lance, he should be the starting quarterback. And it's one of those classic examples of production over potential. Because let's tell the truth about this situation, right? Brock Purdy, obviously right now, looks like the better quarterback than Trey Lance. But the reason why people continue to push for Trey Lance to get an opportunity to start is because they believe that Trey Lance could get the 49ers to the Super Bowl and potentially win it with how high his upside is. And a lot of people think about what Trey Lance could be instead of actually looking at Trey Lance for what he is now. And you see, the problem that we often face in life is that when we meet somebody that we have high expectations for, our expectations end up tending to be so high that we think about what they could be at their potential. And we end up overlooking what they actually are at the present moment. And what Trey Lance is right now is a really raw quarterback. Didn't really play a lot at college. He's really inexperienced. He's really slow when it comes to, going through his reads, dissecting defenses. He just doesn't look like a starting caliber NFL quarterback right now. But you look at the potential that he has with his athleticism, his arm strength. He could be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if he could put it all together. But the problem with this situation is that the 49ers are a team that's built to win now. They don't have time to wait for Trey Lance to figure it out. And the NFL, at the end of the day, is not about potential. It's not about what you can be. It's about what can you be for me right now? How can you best better our football team at this moment? And Brock Purdy is the guy who gives you better quarterback play at this moment. He doesn't have the upside and the potential that Trey Lance has, but right now he gives you a better chance to win games and to win a Super Bowl than what Trey Lance does at this moment. And you see, the NFL is a performance-based business. This isn't a business that is based on production. Performance and how you play in games matters more than what you could be. These coaches don't have time to wait for potential anymore. Do you know what waiting for potential gets you? It gets you fired. It gets you out of a job. And a lot of people just look at this situation from Trey Lance's standpoint, but we don't think about the implications that comes with whiffing, with drafting a quarterback early in the first round. When you miss on a quarterback in the first round, it sets your franchise back years. The 49ers were fortunate enough that they were able to retain Jimmy Garoppolo, and they were able to, luckily enough, draft Brock Purdy in the last pick of the previous year's draft. But if they didn't have Jimmy Garoppolo or Brock Purdy right now, do you know how bad of a situation the 49ers will find themselves in right now? They're very fortunate that they have this kind of quarterback controversy. Now, the downside of this is that you gave up 3 first-round picks to draft Trey Lance. And that's a huge reason why 49ers want to see Trey Lance out there. They want to see Trey Lance live up to those expectations because you invested so much into this dude. You want him to be the guy. You want those first-round picks to actually mean something. But at the end of the day, we've seen what Trey Lance has done in the small sample size of games that he's played in, and he hasn't really looked that good. You look at Brock Purdy, this dude came in and he was ready. He was prepared. What has separated Trey Lance from Brock Purdy? One guy comes in and he looks poised. He already is comfortable within the offense. And then you have Trey Lance, who is a young quarterback still trying to figure it out. Brock Purdy did come into the league starting several years at Iowa State, a Power 5 institution where he had a lot of success. And Trey Lance comes from North Dakota State, a FCS powerhouse, but doesn't have the same amount of experience starting at the collegiate level that Brock Purdy had when he was coming in. So obviously, this was going to take a little bit of time for Trey Lance to get his footing in the NFL. But the problem is that Trey Lance hasn't really been given an opportunity to find his footing. And it's not all his fault because, like I alluded to earlier, misfortune can lead to another man's opportunity. And you want to know what the difference is between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance? Brock Purdy, when he got his opportunity, he seized the moment. He took advantage of it, and he made every single snap count. Meanwhile, you look at Trey Lance, when he got his opportunity, he struggled. Listen to Trey Lance post-game press conference after their Week 1 game against the Chicago Bears. He acknowledged that he made a lot of mistakes. He acknowledged that he didn't play his best football. You look at Brock Purdy, you didn't really see that in his first NFL action. Against the Miami Dolphins, Jimmy G goes down. Brock Purdy comes in having no practice time with the starting first team wide receivers, and he comes in and balls out. That's the example of being prepared and being ready for the moment. Brock Purdy was ready for his opportunity. Meanwhile, Trey Lance is a guy who's still trying to figure it out. And in today's NFL, you don't have time to figure it out anymore. Look at all of the talent that's coming into the league at quarterback. These new quarterbacks are coming into the league and they're hitting the ground running. Justin Herbert, 15 minutes before kickoff against the Kansas City Chiefs, Anthony Lynn goes up to him and says, "Hey, Justin, you got to start because Tyrod Taylor has a punctured lung against the Kansas City Chiefs." And Justin Herbert was drafted really high in the draft, and 15 minutes before kickoff, he probably didn't have a lot of practice with the first team offense, and he comes in on a 15-minute short notice in his first ever NFL action against the Kansas City Chiefs and absolutely balls out. That's the example of a quarterback being ready for the moment, being ready for the opportunity. Joe Burrow came in and he was good right away. You don't have time to wait 2, 3, 4 years for a quarterback to hit their stride. The best opportunity to win a Super Bowl is when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Think about Jordan Love. Jordan Love, I think, is going to succeed with Green Bay because Green Bay hasn't rushed him into being the starter. The 49ers tried to rush Trey Lance into being their quarterback one. Did Trey Lance ever legitimately beat out Jimmy Garoppolo? Let's just be honest about this. What the 49ers did was rush Trey Lance when he wasn't ready. After his rookie season, when he sat most of the year, you go into the offseason, and the 49ers pretty much ghosted Jimmy G. Remember, they didn't even want him to participate in training camp. They tried to trade him, but he had injury concerns, so that kind of halted trade talks. And then we get to the season, and then they redo a deal with Jimmy Garoppolo. He comes back. Trey Lance gets injured. And what does Jimmy G do? He comes in and he seizes the opportunity. And then Jimmy G goes down. And what does Brock Purdy do? He seizes the opportunity. You see the difference? Jimmy Garoppolo, despite all his faults, is still somebody who was able to have some success with San Francisco. This was somebody who was able to have some really productive seasons under Kyle Shanahan. Same thing with Brock Purdy. But what has Trey Lance done up to this point in his NFL career? You see, Trey Lance was never ready to be the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. They thought that sitting him for a year would have given him enough time to be comfortable enough in this offense that he could go ahead and have a productive first season as the full-time starter, but it didn't work out that way because he was so raw than what they initially thought. This is somebody who struggles to read defenses. He isn't as athletic as what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch initially thought. And at this point, I'm not going to call him a bust, but I think it's safe to say that he's just not a good fit with the San Francisco 49ers. They whiffed on Trey Lance. And Trey Lance, in this situation, it's hard to get rid of him because nobody probably wants to pay the guaranteed money that he has left on his rookie deal. And plus, nobody really wants to invest anything into somebody that they don't really know can even play. When you trade for Trey Lance or whatever happens to Trey Lance in the foreseeable future, whatever new team picks him up basically has to rebuild him from the ground up. This is how raw Trey Lance is as a quarterback. I don't even think Trey Lance will be a starting quarterback on any other NFL team. Name me the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now and tell me if Trey Lance would even be better than those guys. That's how raw this dude is as a quarterback. And Kyle Shanahan does deserve a lot of fault for where the 49ers are in this quarterback controversy. Did he go about things the proper way when it came to developing Trey Lance? Probably not. There are some mistakes that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch probably made along the way, such as trying to anoint Trey Lance as the starter way too early when he didn't prove it. And even going into this year, I feel like Trey Lance probably should have been given a little bit more of an opportunity to compete. But at the same time, when Brock Purdy was rehabbing from his elbow injury, Trey Lance had all the time during the offseason, OTAs, minicamp, and training camp prior to Brock Purdy returning to prove himself that he was the guy to lead San Francisco, and he's yet to do that. He's yet to prove himself. And up to this point in his career, when you have a quarterback that's yet to really prove anything, to cement himself as the franchise guy, you kind of got to start looking at him with the people's eyebrow, and you got to start asking yourself, is this the right guy to lead our organization? And when you have this kind of situation where you got somebody who comes out of nowhere and performs so well, but you got this guy on the bench who you invested so much capital to draft and trade up for, it makes for a really awkward situation. But at the end of the day, though, the NFL isn't about potential. It's about production. Can you go out and make the throws necessary to win the games? Can you go out and make the right decisions with the football? Can you limit mistakes? Can you come through in the big moments? And Trey Lance has yet to prove that. And 2 games that we saw Brock Purdy, he was better than Trey Lance. Compare Trey Lance's first 2 games to Brock Purdy's 2 first games, and it's not really close. And you can make any excuse that you want. Oh, Trey Lance didn't have Chris McCaffrey. It doesn't effing matter. The 49ers were still a Super Bowl contender when Trey Lance took over the helm at QB. And you can keep saying that, oh, the potential is just so high, JT, you got to give him a chance. Do you think that a guy like George Kittle, who's getting up there in age, wants to waste what's left of his NFL career waiting to see if Trey Lance can ever live up to the expectations that he had when he was drafted so high? George Kittle wants to win a Super Bowl. Deebo Samuel wants to win a Super Bowl. Brandon Ayuk wants to win the Super Bowl. Nick Bosa wants to win the Super Bowl, and they don't want to wait 3 to 4 years down the road for it. They want to win now. A lot of people don't think about the locker room dynamics that go into these kind of decisions. How do you think the locker room would respond if Trey Lance was giving the starting job over Brock Purdy simply for where he was drafted at? Players don't respect that. As a matter of fact, players hate that because they rather go with the guy who can get the job done. They don't want to wait for somebody to figure it out. This is a production-based business. People have families to feed. You can't play football for your whole entire life, so you want to maximize the best talent that you have on the roster when they're at their prime. And when you wait on your franchise quarterback for 4 to 5 years to reach his potential, you waste some of your top talents on your roster. The NFL is about trying to win the Super Bowl as fast as possible in the most efficient, effective manner. It's chess, not checkers. And when it comes to checkers, you don't make decisions solely based on potential outcomes. You have to make the best decisions to help you get the lead in the game at the present moment. A lot of people are really split over this Trey Lance, Brock Purdy fiasco. You can say and cry that it's unfair what's happened to Trey Lance, and I would agree with you. But guess what I'm going to say, and this may sound cliche, but life is unfair. It's unfair that people have to wake up every day and clock into a 9 to 5. It's unfair that, rent is as high as what it is right now. It's unfair that it's hard to find a house with the current state of the present economy. But it's life. You get over it and you move on and you roll with the punches. That's what the NFL is. The NFL isn't a sob story business. You don't get opportunities because you feel you deserve an opportunity. No, you get an opportunity because you deserved it, because you proved yourself. Trey Lance hasn't proven anything. People just want to anoint Trey Lance the starter because where he was drafted, and doing this, making decisions like that is what makes you lose the locker room. Players don't respect that shit. And that's what I keep trying to utter to the Trey Lance fanboys who continue to post all these long paragraphs on social media about, oh my God, Trey Lance, look at his eyes. Like, he looks so defeated. All he wanted to do was to compete. He just wanted a fair opportunity, JT. And Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers, they're not giving it to him, JT. Oh, he got injured. Imagine if he never got injured. Oh, he has so much more potential than Brock Purdy. Who cares? Save the sob stories. The NFL is about performance. When you go to work, your boss doesn't want to hear no excuses about why you couldn't get the certain job done. He wants it done in the most efficient manner. People have jobs. Nobody has time to wait and gamble on potential. And that's what a lot of people are missing about this situation. Brock Purdy came in and took advantage of the opportunity that was given to him. I don't think Brock Purdy is going to fall off. You don't go from Mr. Irrelevant to taking a team to the NFC Championship all because you were carried by talent. The Trey Lance fanboys try to say, oh, Brock Purdy isn't nothing special. He had a great team around him. Well, this same team that Trey Lance had, mostly minus Christian McCaffrey, was pretty good, and he didn't really do a lot with it. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy took it all the way to the NFC Championship game. And a lot of 49er players will tell you, as Deebo Samuel, if Brock Purdy never got injured against the Philadelphia Eagles, they strongly believe in their hearts they would have won that game and they would have been in the Super Bowl in a rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs. At the end of the day, it's not about sob stories. It's not about, oh, he was mistreated. Oh, he was compromised. At the end of the day, it's about, can you go out there and get the job done? And Trey Lance can't get it done. He may not be a bust. It may be too soon to label him a bust, but I think we're looking at our final days as seeing Trey Lance in a 49ers uniform. They signed Sam Darnold for a reason. And I think there's a strong chance that he ends up becoming the third string quarterback right behind Sam. Nobody wants to trade for Trey Lance because he's a wild experiment. You don't really know if you're going to be able to fix this dude. Some people just don't have what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And I know it's really harsh to say that, but it's the truth. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL for a reason. And there are millions of backups. It's really hard to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's an exclusive club. You're top 1% at your position in the world. Same thing with the NBA. If you can't get it done, guess what the NFL is going to do? They're going to find somebody else who can get it done. Just like if you can't get your job done efficiently at work, guess what your boss is going to do? They're going to fire you and they're going to hire a replacement. The NFL is a business. Nobody cares about your feelings. Nobody cares about morals. Nobody cares about ethics. What matters more over anything is winning, because with winning delivers money, it delivers security. And also it brings you, the fact that you also can have a chance at having a great career when you have success. Kyle Shanahan, I feel like his perception has really been altered with how this situation has played out. And I know he hasn't gone about this in the right way, but there are people who are saying that Kyle Shanahan struggles to develop quarterbacks. Well, what about Brock Purdy? He looked pretty fine. Jimmy Garoppolo had some really good years. If Jimmy Garoppolo could have stayed healthy, do you think they still would have drafted Trey Lance? If Jimmy Garoppolo could stay healthy for a full 16, 17 game season, do you think Kyle Shanahan would want to move on from that? Kyle Shanahan is somebody who cares about if you can get the job done or not. He doesn't care about all the flashy stuff. Brock Purdy isn't flashy, but he gets the job done. A lot of people are enamored with flash. Flash sells. It's marketable. It sells tickets. It goes viral on social media. It brings a lot of attention. But you know what doesn't bring a lot of attention? The guy who is consistent, who gets the job done. Drew Brees wasn't flashy. That's why he never won an MVP. Everybody always chose the more flashier pick for MVP over Drew Brees. We give Tom Brady so much respect because of his championship accolades. The fact that he has 7 Super Bowls. But if he didn't have those 7 Super Bowls and he still had an all-time great career, will we view Tom Brady as the greatest quarterback of all time? The man has won the most Super Bowls ever for a quarterback ever in the National Football League, and yet we still talk about how Aaron Rodgers was more talented than Tom Brady. And what if Aaron Rodgers played for the Patriots instead of Brady? That just goes to show you that production, if you're not flashy, nobody really talks about you unless you're winning. Brock Purdy gets it done. That's why people are skeptical about him, because he's not flashy. He doesn't do anything that makes you drop your draw. With Trey Lance, he'll give you a couple of big throws that make you go, oh, wow, like I see why the 49ers gave up so much for him, but the dude is just too raw. And it's unfortunate that he got drafted into a situation like this because he couldn't control really what team drafted him. He couldn't foresee how this situation was going to play out. I feel bad for Trey Lance because I do think that he puts in the work. But if you watch the Netflix quarterback documentary, Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, Marcus Mariota, they were all putting in the work. They were all watching film. They were all doing things outside of the field to try to hone their game. But what separated Patrick Mahomes from Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota? Patrick Mahomes was just so much more talented and just so much more gifted, and he just has something different about him that stands out. Kirk Cousins put in a lot of work. He was a really good quarterback, and he had some really good moments, but in the big games, he folded. Marcus Mariota, when he was asked to have to win games with the ball in his hands, he always came up short every single time. That's what separates the great quarterbacks from the average quarterbacks in this game. The great quarterbacks step up and they make big plays and big moments. They rise up to the occasion. Tom Brady's situation was unusual. This was somebody who was a late round selection who got pretty much laughed at during his NFL combine performance. People laughed at him for looking unathletic, not having a strong arm. And guess what? He ended up being the greatest quarterback of all time. You want to know why? Because Tom Brady rose to the occasion in big moments. This was somebody who seized his opportunity. The best quarterbacks in the NFL seized the moment. They live for the moment. You look at Brock Purdy, when he came in against the Miami Dolphins, he looked poised. He looked confident. You didn't see somebody who started out as a fourth stringer. You didn't see Mr. Irrelevant. You saw a guy that really believed and had confidence in himself. You don't see that same level of confidence in Trey Lance that you see in Brock Purdy. And Trey Lance, you see somebody whose confidence is just struck. If you go back and you watch that Las Vegas Raiders game, he had 2 throws that could have been easy completions, but he ended up pump faking because he was second guessing himself. He was indecisive. He pump faked on 1 throw because he nearly threw an out route when the Raiders were running a simple cover 2 defense. Everybody knows if you're going against a defense that's running cover 2 that you're not going to be able to hit anything in the flats. You got to attack the hole shots either in the middle of the field or on the outside. If you can't even recognize that in the preseason, that's a problem. There's only so much development that a coach can do. You can blame Kyle Shanahan all you want to, but eventually, when do we put some blame on Trey Lance? When do we ask the question, what could have Trey Lance have done differently to have a better career than what he's had so far with San Francisco? Even with the injuries, you can't plan for injuries. They just happen. It's unfortunate, but life is all about how you respond to situations of adversity, how you come back from setbacks. There's so many excuses that people make for Trey Lance, but nobody actually thinks to hold Trey Lance accountable somewhat for what has transpired in his career. That's all this really has become, is just, a big divisive controversy amongst 49ers fans. You got fans who just always make excuses for Trey Lance and then make excuses for why Brock Purdy isn't a guy. Instead of just seeing this situation for what it is, we have to create narratives. Oh, if the 49ers are going to be a Super Bowl team, it's all going to depend on Trey Lance. Bro, what the hell has Trey Lance showed that makes you think that the 49ers are going to be capable of winning a Super Bowl with him at the helm at quarterback? Nothing. The dude hasn't performed. He hasn't been good. We got to stop. Eventually, when do we draw the line and say, you know what? Trey Lance just isn't it. Eventually, we got to stop pointing the finger and saying, Kyle Shanahan is the reason for this. Eventually, we got to point the finger at Trey Lance and say, what could have you done better in this situation to be more prepared? Why was Brock Purdy more prepared than you? Brock Purdy was a 4th-string quarterback and came in out of nowhere in the middle of the game against the Miami Dolphins with a lot of stakes on the line and balled out. What was the difference between why Brock Purdy was so good versus why Trey Lance has struggled? And that's the question that doesn't get asked enough when it comes to this discussion. We keep saying that Trey Lance should be the starter just because where he was drafted. But what has he done to earn that right? You got to earn everything in life. Nothing is given to you. Nobody's going to give you a handout. Nobody's going to give you money just because they feel bad for you. Nobody's going to give you money because they see you crying on the street. The world doesn't owe you sympathy. The NFL doesn't owe Trey Lance sympathy. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch don't owe Trey Lance shit. And I know it's harsh and it's tough to hear, but it's the truth. A lot of people on Twitter keep making it seem like the 49ers owe Trey Lance the right to prove himself. He's had plenty of chances to prove himself, and he hasn't done it. When Brock Purdy got his opportunity to prove himself, you know what he did? He took this team to the NFC Championship. So why should he have to be the backup to Trey Lance? Because he has more upside than him? How does that make sense? Upside and potential doesn't win games. That's why I tell you guys, all this ceiling, all this high potential stuff when it comes to the draft is just nonsense. Can you play or can you not play? It's the question. And Trey Lance can't play right now. We don't even know if he's going to be able to be the backup quarterback over Sam freaking Darnold. But we got to try to craft all these narratives to make Trey Lance look good instead of just looking at him for what he is. And that's the problem with today's society. We sympathize with people so much to the point that we tend to forget, you got to earn certain things. You have to prove yourself. We forget about the business side of sports. Sports isn't about your feelings. It's not about what you feel you deserve. It's about what you earned. And Brock Purdy has earned the right to be the starting quarterback for San Francisco. And you may be asking, JT, why do you continue to talk about this? Like, we know Brock Purdy is the starter, because if you go on my channel and you go to the poll section, you will see I asked who should be the starting quarterback for the 49ers. And there are a good amount of people, over 30%, who have voted Trey Lance. And that tells you everything you need to know. People want handouts, but nobody wants to earn anything. Trey Lance hasn't earned anything. He hasn't earned the right to be the starting quarterback for San Francisco. We just want to give him an opportunity because he needs reps. If Trey Lance needs reps, you know where he should go? To the XFL or the USFL. Because the NFL game is just too fast for a guy this raw and inexperienced to be able to pick it up so quickly. If Trey Lance was drafted in the early 2000s or the late 1990s, he would have a better chance at being successful because there was more patience back then. Nobody gives you a lot of patience in today's NFL. Pete's Take says Tua had time. What are you talking about? Tua wasn't bad his first season. Tua was way ahead of what Trey Lance has looked like right now. Tua looked like a top 10 quarterback last season. He was a midseason MVP candidate at one point. Trey Lance hasn't looked anywhere close to that. Plenty of QBs have time only because anomaly pops out like Purdy doesn't mean it's always happening. How about Jordan Love? Jordan Love was Aaron Rodgers' backup for how many years? The Packers have been one of the best franchises in the history of the NFL when it comes to developing quarterbacks. You want to know why? Because they don't force guys. They don't just force guys into action if they're not ready. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre for how many years? And then he took over and he was successful. When you properly develop a quarterback and you don't rush them out there and you actually try to develop them the proper way and give them 3 to 4 years, then okay, you're going to have the opportunity for Trey Lance to reach his ceiling. But in today's NFL, teams are impatient. That's just the reality of the National Football League. In the year 2023, quarterbacks have a small time frame to develop. You either have to come in and be good right away, show a little bit of promise, or you got to be a guy who can sit for a year, and then when your number finally gets called like Patrick Mahomes, you go ahead and you ball out. Let's talk about all of the great quarterbacks who were drafted in the first round, who were good right away. Deshaun Watson, his rookie season for the Houston Texans, he was on pace for having one of the greatest rookie seasons ever out of a rookie quarterback. Justin Herbert had the best rookie season ever for a first-year quarterback. Joe Burrow was good right away. The only reason Trevor Lawrence wasn't good his rookie season was because how much of a shit show it was when Urban Meyer was the head coach. Nobody has time to sit back and wait for you to develop anymore. You saw what happened with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was going into this season with a lot of things on the line. If he didn't have the season that he had last year, do you think Daniel Jones would have remained the starting quarterback for the New York Giants? No, he wouldn't have. You got to come in. You got to be good quickly. You don't have 4 or 5 years anymore, people. It's 2023. There's so many great quarterbacks coming out that if you're not good by year 3, teams are already losing faith in you. Jalen Hurts, people had a lot of questions and skepticism about him going into the 2022 NFL season. There were people who thought that he could potentially end up being replaced. Justin Fields is in year 3. And what are people saying about him? This is a make or break year for Justin Fields. If he doesn't figure it out this year, he's probably going to end up getting traded or moved on from. And that's what people have a hard time being able to swallow. And you 49ers fans should be able to understand this. You should be able to understand how much the NFL has changed, because remember what happened with Alex Smith? How long did it take for Alex Smith to finally be able to be a serviceable, productive quarterback? It didn't take Alex Smith until Harbaugh getting there for him to really be able to figure it out. You're not living in that time anymore. And regardless of what you want to say, there's so many talented quarterbacks that are coming in and being good right away. If you're not producing at a high level, at least in your first couple of years, or you don't show promise, teams are going to sour over you. Look what happened with Sean McVay and Jared Goff. Jared Goff took the Rams to the Super Bowl, and then not too long after, Sean McVay shipped them out of town because he got tired of them. You don't have long to prove yourself in the National Football League. It's just the reality. And a lot of 49ers fans who support Trey Lance, they don't live in reality. They live in the what if. They always live in la la land. What can you be? Or the potential is just so high, like nobody cares anymore. We want the guy who can lead us to the championship now. Nobody has time to sit back and wait for you to figure it out anymore. And life, you either figure it out or you get left behind and you swim with the rest of the fishes. You either thrive and you swim amongst the rest and you swim with the sharks, or you get left behind and you just swim with Dorothy and Finding Nemo. This 49ers quarterback controversy has been super divisive amongst the San Francisco 49ers fan base, and it really shouldn't be this way. It should be pretty apparent that you have a guy that has a lot of potential, but a guy who hasn't lived up to it. Production over potential is always going to win out. You don't have a long time to prove yourself in the National Football League. You don't have a lot of time to prove yourself in life. People aren't going to give you the benefit of a doubt in most things. You got to earn that. You got to prove yourself, and you don't have a long time to do that because people have money on the line. People have careers on the line. A lot of people are just looking at this from one angle. You're not looking at this from a 360 lens. You're just thinking about Trey Lance, but you're not thinking about the implications of what if you put Trey Lance out there and how you hinder the championship window that the 49ers have, how you can waste the prime of Nick Bosa but not being able to maximize and win right away. Brock Purdy gives you the best chance to win. Brock Purdy is different. You don't go from Mr. Relevant to taking the team to the conference championship because you were carried. There's something special about Brock Purdy. Mr. Relevant is not taken serious. They got a parade for it. It's a meme. It's a joke. Most of the Mr. Relevants don't even pan out. Brock Purdy may be the greatest Mr. Relevant story in the history of the NFL. Honestly. You don't go from being the last pick of the draft to taking the team to the conference championship game without having a different mindset, without having a different mentality. Brock Purdy was ready. Tom Brady was ready. Dak Prescott was ready. Kirk Cousins was ready. These were guys who weren't first round picks. They didn't have high expectations. They had low expectations coming out, and they surprised everybody. They may not be the most talented quarterbacks ever, but they got the job done. There's a divide between the 49ers fan base, and it shouldn't be. I think more people should stop looking at Trey Lance for what he could be and start looking at him for what he is right now. Trying to judge people based on what they could be gets your feelings hurt, and it gets you put in a lot of bad situations. You got to look at things for what they are right now, and what it is right now is simple. Trey Lance just isn't it in San Francisco. Now, he could go elsewhere and maybe change the trajectory of his career. Maybe he can go to a head coach that's going to be more willing to wait a lot longer to develop him. But in today's NFL, when you're drafted as high as what Trey Lance is, nobody has a lot of patience to wait for you to get it together for the first 4 or 5 years. So if you struggle your first 3 years, it's SOL.